The Philadelphia Eagles report to training camp on Tuesday, which means we are 1 day away from the return of Eagles football. And if the sound of that, if the thought of that gets you pumped up, I want you to hit that thumbs up icon and like the video. And if you don't like the video, I question your passion for the birds. E-A-G-L-E-S. Eagles! Man, those chants are going to be ringing all throughout Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field, and I cannot wait for it. Today's show is sponsored by Kanzuri. You can get 15% off at kanzuri.com/chat. Height-boosting shoes that are also very stylish as well. We'll tell you more about them here in just a little while. As for the purpose of today's show, hope all of you out there are having a fantastic Monday. You had a jam-packed weekend, and your weeks are off to a good start. With training camp on the horizon, just a few hours away at this point, we're going to take a look at who makes this Eagles roster when we take a gander at ESPN's roster projection for the 53-man squad, but also as part of that, some surprise candidates, which does include a former Eagles first-round pick. Let's begin here with the quarterback position. This is pretty obvious, right? I like the addition of Marcus Mariota in NFL free agency because when Jalen Hurts got hurt, Gardner Minshew came in, there was a drastic difference in the style of quarterback. And I didn't think that Minshew running read option, little zone read fit. I think that Marcus Mariota fits really well in that role. So if Hurts were to get injured, there isn't a huge change as far as the system goes. And he's been in this league for a really long time, even though he hasn't lived up to the lofty expectations of being that number 2 pick after he was a Heisman Trophy winner at Oregon. Here's what Tim McManus does a great job of covering the Eagles for ESPN said about the quarterback situation because, yeah, the quarterback who the Eagles selected in the 6th round, Tanner McKee, does not make the roster for his projection here. He's going against Ian Book for the number 3 spot. McKay may make it onto the roster if Philadelphia feels he could be plucked by another team for their practice squad. I also want to tee up this question. If you haven't watched the quarterback documentary on Netflix as it profiles Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, and Marcus Mariota, fantastic watch. It gets the juices flowing for football season. They painted Mariota in an interesting light because he got hurt, struggled, then left the team. Are your thoughts on Mariota different after watching quarterback than before you watched the documentary? Share your thoughts, be a film critic down below like producer Jack. Eagles running backs now. Loaded room that I really like, and maybe I'm higher on this group than a lot of other people out there. There isn't that bona fide bell cow back, but a lot of talent. DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashaad Penny, and Boston Scott making the team per ESPN. I think that this room gives you a semblance of different options from power to speed to versatility in catching the football. 3-down backs, couple of 2-down backs, short yardage guys. Boston Scott, kind of your specialist hybrid among those. ESPN on the RBs here. Fantasy football players will be eager to see how the rotation shakes out among this intriguing bunch. The big question, as always, is if Penny can stay healthy enough to assume a significant role. Trey Sermon has drawn consistent praise from Coach Nick Sirianni and is waiting in the wings should an opportunity present itself. Now, Trey Sermon being on the outside looking in is not much of a surprise cut, so to speak, but he is a guy who could crack the roster. And if Rashaad Penny gets injured again, if another injury happens, look for Sermon, who's gotten a lot of praise from Nick Sirianni, to potentially crack this squad as a former 3rd-round pick by the San Francisco 49ers out of Ohio State. This is what I want you to do right now. Grade the Eagles roster Madden style. Everybody is up in arms about these Madden ratings, fantasy football Madden ratings. 2 things I don't put personally a lot of stock in. I'd rather talk football and bet on it to try to make some dough. Scale this Eagles roster for me from 1 to 100. As I mentioned off the rip, Philadelphia Eagles now is sponsored by Kanzuri. 15% off if you use our link, kanzuri.com/chat. And yeah, we have some great animations we want to show you thanks to our friends at Kanzuri. Fellas, have you ever wished you were a little bit taller? Maybe you matched on Tinder, but her profile says must be over 6 feet. Maybe your date wants to wear heels, but she can't because it'll make her taller than you. That's never good when you're posing for pictures. Well, I got the short kings covered with today's sponsor, Kanzuri. They make shoes that can make you up to 2.8 inches taller without anyone knowing. Look, girls get heels, makeup, and push-up bras. Why can't men get a confidence boost as well? We're all the same height lying down anyway, if you know what I mean. Kenzuri shoes, not only height boosting, but also stylish and comfortable. They're not Grandpa's Velcro shoes. Come on, Grandpa! But fashionable shoes that can receive compliments even without the height increase. The height insoles integrated into the shoes, making them the ultimate height hack. So for a limited time only, my Fly Eagles Fly family, for our listeners and viewers, get an extra 15% off your order at kenzuri.com/chat. This site is already 30% off, and with our link, you get an extra 15% off. That's 45% off your entire order. Support our show. Check them out, KONZURI.com/chat. Life's short, but you don't have to be. It's time to level up the playing field, my boys. Maybe update that dating profile to 6 feet. Kenzuri, absolute game changer when it comes to your dating life. That link, kicking it in the comment section and the description of this video. Now let's go to wide receiver. A bunch here that has some premium talent, but not a lot of depth. A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, record-breaking seasons respectively among those two. Quez Watkins is the home run vertical threat who, if he puts it all together, he gives this wide receiving unit a lot more depth. Olamide, Zaccheaus, look out for him. I called it a sneaky, underrated signing at the time. Played good ball for the Atlanta Falcons, just didn't get a lot of recognition because of subpar quarterback play and not a lot of good weapons around him. And then Britton Covey at wide receiver 5. I know a lot of you don't want to hear this, right? Are we looking at another year that Britton Covey is going to be this team's punt returner and maybe kick returner as well? At Utah, the dude was a human highlight reel, an unbelievable special teams ace who was a home run threat. Every time he caught a punt or a kick, he could take it to the crib, right? And he was sure-handed in his rookie season with Philadelphia. Rarely, if ever, fumbled, but barely picked up any yards. The speed was matched at the NFL level by other special teams players and looked pretty small out there as he always got rocked on those returns. I would hope and imagine there could be a better option out there, but at the very least, at least he's sure-handed. To tight ends now. Dallas Goedert, one of the best all-around tight ends in the game. I actually think the competition here is a talking point and a subject matter that's pretty fascinating going into training camp. You have Grant Calcaterra, Jack Stoll, and Dan Arnold as the 3 tight ends behind Dallas Goedert. Arnold coming over to the Eagles in free agency. And one of the names here, a popular name among Eagles fans. We'll get to him in a second. Philly signed the veteran Arnold to a low-risk 1-year deal this offseason. Also added a pair of undrafted rookies in Colorado's Brady Russell and Virginia Tech's Dalton Keene. The Eagles are still searching for the right mix behind Goedert, who has developed into one of the better tight ends in the league. Who are we not talking about as far as making this team? Tyree Jackson played quarterback at Buffalo, surprised and impressed a lot of people throughout training camp over the last 2 off seasons, and him making the switch from quarterback to tight end, facing an uphill battle 2 years ago, starts to earn some trust from the coaching staff, as well as some playing time late in the year, tears his ACL against the Dallas Cowboys. He gives you the athletic presence at tight end that this Eagles team misses in that area. If he pops in camp, I highly doubt he is going to get cut. The Eagles' depth, though, as far as receiving the football, outside of Dallas Goedert, A.J. Brown, and DeVonta Smith, is a little bit concerning going into training camp because outside of that, a lot of unproven players and players like Quez Watkins who haven't been able to put it all together. A.J. Brown, DeVonta Smith, and Dallas Goedert accounted for 69% of the Eagles' targets in 2022 and 80% of their intended air yards. If one of them goes down, could spell trouble for Jalen Hurts and this offense. Now let's shift gears to the offensive line, probably the biggest strength of this football team as far as starters go. Every member of this offensive line last year did make it to the Pro Bowl, was a Pro Bowl alternate or a All-Pro. Now you lose Isaac Seumalo. He got paid by the Pittsburgh Steelers. Good on him. He certainly earned the bag. Jeff Stoutland University product. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelce, Cam Jurgens, Lane Johnson as your front 5 is very, very good. The depth also somewhat concerning. Tyler Steen, 3rd-round rookie. Jack Driscoll, he can really be a valuable player as far as a replacement goes short-term. Opeta, Trevor, Reid, and Brett Toth making the team here. I think that those last few positions along the offensive line, especially at offensive tackle, are up for grabs, and it's one of those you eat or get eaten, right? If you play well in camp, you make the squad. If you don't, see ya. ESPN on the state of the offensive line. With Sayamala departing in free agency, Jurgens and Steen, the rookie out of Alabama, will compete for the starting right guard spot. Two other rookies, tackles Reid and Chim Okorafor out of Benedictine College, were signed after the draft to vie for reserve roles. So once again, pretty good training camp competition for you football nerds out there who like to keep an eye on the trenches as far as backups go. Now let's go to the defensive line, another one of the strengths and pillars of Howie Roseman's team-building strategy. Fletcher Cox, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Moro Ojomo, and Janarius Robinson all making the squad here along defensive line. Keep in mind, Sean Desai, once again, going to run like the Eagles did last year as a Vic Fangio disciple as well, a 3-4 defense. So we're not including some of the outside linebackers here. Competition will be healthy for some of the backup spots, and I want to see what Jalen Carter is going to be able to do. Milton Williams played pretty well toward the middle portion and the end of last year. Can he carve out a larger role? What are some of the other players like a Janarius Robinson going to be able to do as a prospect who is once looked at as a guy with a lot of potential and has shown some flashes of being a quality player? McManus on the Eagles' defensive line now. Arguably the biggest loss for the Eagles this offseason, the departure of Javon Hargrave, 4-year, $84 million deal with the San Francisco 49ers, coming off 11 sacks and 10 tackles for loss in 2022. Jalen Carter, the standout from Georgia, was selected 9th overall in April's draft and is expected to play right away. He'll join Williams, Davis, and Cox in the rotation. At defensive end this summer, we'll show whether former first-round pick Derek Barnett is still in the team's plans. Let's talk about Derek Barnett. Derek Barnett could be a surprise cut candidate for the Philadelphia Eagles, given the resources that they invested in along that defensive line and some of the players that they have brought in. The rookie who in 2017 contributed to the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles, got off to a good start and has been very inconsistent since then. But I'll tell you this, I've always compared Derek Barnett to Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham, first-round pick, selected over Earl Thomas. First couple of years were really rough. Then after that, he became a really good player, one of the more valuable defensive ends in the league, and a franchise Philadelphia icon who will always be remembered for his legendary performances en route to that Super Bowl, but also his character and his impact on the culture. Derek Barnett doesn't necessarily have the leadership and cultural impact of Brandon Graham, but former first-round pick who has been disappointing to start his career. I also compare the game of Brandon Graham to Derek Barnett. They are not overly twitchy athletes. They are pass rush specialists who really put a lot into their craft and do a good job of just getting after the quarterback with quarterback pressures and quarterback hits. And as we showed you, some of the numbers for Derek Barnett, his first 6 years as compared to Brandon Graham's first 6 years, they've actually been better. And Brandon Graham has never been known as a bona fide sack artist who puts up stupid digits in sacking the quarterback. But quarterback hits, quarterback hurries, and being good against the run, those types of things Graham has been able to develop great at, and the same can be said for Barnett here. Sacks won't blow you away, but more quarterback hits than Brandon Graham, and the hurries, still a pretty solid number for him, very similar games as well. To the linebacking crew, Hassan Reddick, obviously coming off that great season last year, you look for him to be as good, if not better, from that 16-sack season. He had 19.5 sacks combined in the regular season and in the playoffs, a pillar of this Eagles defense and one of the best value signings of all of free agency last year. So you have him, and then Nolan Smith, as Hassan Reddick's going to be able to tutor him and teach him the game of football. Very similar games and athletic builds. Patrick Johnson, Nakobe Dean, Nicholas Morrow, Christian Ellis, and Sean Bradley, the traditional linebackers, so to speak, on this Eagles team. That's 7 total backers making the roster here. Obviously, that number inflated as compared to teams who run a 4-3 because the Eagles run that 3-4 multiple front. ESPN on the linebackers for this team. Dean, the maestro, great word, of the historic 2021 Georgia defense is expected to elevate into a starting role along with Nicholas Morrow. Christian Ellis, the third-year player out of Idaho, was one of the top standouts this spring, boosting hopes he can be a contributor. Smith was a late first-round pick selection by the Birds and will likely find some snaps immediately as an edge rusher. Nolan Smith, I think, could crack this rotation, and for Nakobe Dean at linebacker, to be specific, it's your time, Nakobe. You didn't play a lot last year, very limited workload, but as the maestro of that Georgia national championship defense, you were the leader. You identified plays before they happened. You had a great instinctual feel for the game of football. Show that. You'll see a lot of playing time this year for Philadelphia. You were wearing the green dot earlier this offseason, meaning you get the plays from Sean Desai, you relay it to the defense. I hope it translates because the dude, he is a ball hawk and a good football player. Now to cornerbacks. Darius Slade, James Bradbury, one of the top cornerback duos in the NFL, both with name value, but the game speaks for itself. Last year, they were really good. We'll see what happens with Kelee Ringo if he makes that positional switch from cornerback to safety, but right now, ESPN putting him in there as a corner. Zech McPherson, Avonte Maddox, and Greedy Williams rounding things out. It's pretty wild that the Eagles are this deep at corner, knowing that Greedy Williams could be on the roster bubble, as well as a couple of other players like Josh Jobe and some UDFAs. Here's what McManus had to say rounding up the cornerbacks. Slay, Bradbury, Maddox made up one of the best cornerback triumvirates. Another great word. Tim McManus and his vocabulary bag here. The position was further bolstered by the additions of rookie Ringo and Williams, who started 21 games over 3 seasons with the Cleveland Browns. Josh Jobe, Josiah Scott, Mario Goodrich are among the group of players also vying for spots. And my boy Tanner Plummer, big viewer of Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he was asking me about Mario Goodrich. He's kind of in that category with Josh Jobe. Josh Jobe made this team last year. Josiah Scott got some slot reps once C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Avonte Maddox got hurt. They're going to be vying for roster spots on this team, and if Greedy Williams doesn't come to play, they're going to forget about him being a former second-round pick. The more productive player will end up making this team. Hopefully, Slay and Bradbury don't age overnight, because if they do, other teams' wide receivers are going to be running laps around them. Last positional group, and then we'll get to the specialists. Safety competition. Going to be a fun one to watch here throughout training camp. I think Terrell Edmunds, Reid Blankenship, they are going to be your starting strong safety and free safety. Sidney Brown, Justin Evans, pretty solid backups. I mean, Justin Evans was a former second-round pick, and then you used a third-round pick on Sidney Brown, who's absolutely yoked and put up awesome numbers for the best defense in college football last year with the Fighting Illini. The surprise cut here is Kevon Wallace, who was the earliest draftee at that safety position the Philadelphia Eagles had taken since like Jaquan Jarrett out of Temple University, who ended up being a massive bust for Philadelphia. Wallace did not miss a tackle last year, been a pretty solid special teamer. He lacks high-end speed. In the preseason last year, got straight up burned by Tyreek Hill. And if he doesn't make this team, he's going to have opportunities elsewhere. He's not a bad backup player. ESPN on the safety position here. With C.J. Gardner-Johnson and Marcus Epps leaving in free agency, both starting spots up for grabs, Edmunds and Blankenship the early favorites, but coaches and scouts alike very high on Sidney Brown, the rookie third-round pick out of Illinois. Kevon Wallace also in the mix for a roster spot. This position still feels incomplete. It wouldn't be a surprise to see the front office add here. Interesting note here is it wouldn't be a surprise to see the front office add here. Guy like Budda Baker, maybe he comes to mind if the Eagles can afford it, or maybe a more minor move. But Sidney Brown really impressing this coaching staff in the early going. Eagles specialist, Jake Elliott, one of the best kickers in the league. Aaron Sipos, his roster spot and the seat beneath him is very hot. Ty Zettner out of Kansas State. Shout out Brett. He could make this team realistically. And then Rick Lovato, also a very good long snapper in this league. So with that, we round out the program with this today. Better side of the football. Both offensively and defensively, there are a lot of premier players on both sides of the pill. O for offense, D for defense. Let me know. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Eagles football is about to be back, baby. Let's go!